The massive space station known as Nexus Point floated silently in the empty darkness between three different star systems. It was the largest structure ever built by the Galactic Council, a place where all the great powers of the galaxy could meet and talk without fighting. For 200 years, wars had been ended here. Treaties had been signed here. The fate of entire civilizations had been decided within its gleaming white halls. Today, something historic was about to happen. The human race was coming to negotiate peace. Ambassador Catherine Moore stood at the window of the human shuttle as it approached the station. She was a woman of 53 years, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that told the story of too many sleepless nights. Behind her, the rest of the human delegation sat in nervous silence. Admiral Victor Grant, a tall man with broad shoulders and a calm face, reviewed the briefing documents on his tablet for the 100th time. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Price, the youngest member of the team at only 31, checked and rechecked their communication equipment. Catherine watched the station grow larger in the viewport. Dozens of alien ships were already docked there, vessels of every shape and size imaginable. Some looked like great silver needles. Others resembled living creatures, with holes that seemed to breathe and pulse. The diversity of life in the galaxy never failed to amaze her, even after 20 years of diplomatic service. But today was not a day for wonder. Today was a day that would determine whether humanity survived the next century. The war with the Dominion of Keth had lasted for 47 years. It had begun before Catherine was born. When human explorers accidentally entered space that the Dominion claimed as their own, the Kethrani, the insect-like species that led the Dominion, had responded with immediate violence. They destroyed 3 human colony ships without warning, killing over 50,000 people in a single day. Since then, the fighting had never truly stopped. Billions had died on both sides. Entire planets had been burned to ash. Catherine had lost her father in the Battle of New Helsinki when she was just a girl. Her older brother had vanished during a patrol mission near the border 15 years ago. The war had taken something from nearly every human family, and now, finally, there was a chance for peace. The shuttle docked with a gentle bump, and Catherine took a deep breath. She turned to face her team. "Remember why we are here?" she said quietly. "We are here for every mother who has lost a child to this war. We are here for every soldier who never came home. We are here to end the killing, if we can do so with honor." Victor nodded solemnly. "And if we cannot," Catherine met his eyes, "then we walk away. We do not sell our people's freedom for a false peace." The airlock opened. They stepped onto Nexus Point. The station's interior was designed to accommodate species of all sizes and shapes. The corridors were wide enough for the largest known beings to pass through comfortably. The lighting shifted constantly, adjusting to the visual needs of whoever was nearby. Gravity plates in the floor could be adjusted for different planetary norms. A delegation of Velen officials met them at the dock. The Velens were serpentine creatures with 6 arms and scales that shimmered in shades of blue and green. They had been chosen to serve as neutral mediators because they had no alliances with either humanity or the Dominion. Chancellor Morix, the lead mediator, slithered forward and extended 2 of his hands in greeting. "Ambassador Moore, Admiral Grant, welcome to Nexus Point. The Galactic Council is honored by your presence." Catherine shook his hands formally. "Thank you, Chancellor. Humanity is grateful for this opportunity to seek peace." Morix's forked tongue flickered briefly, tasting the air. It was a Velen habit that Catherine had learned to recognize as a sign of curiosity. "The Dominion delegation arrived yesterday. High Arbiter Xyloth is eager to begin proceedings." "I'm sure he is," Victor muttered under his breath. Catherine shot him a warning glance before returning her attention to Morix. "We are ready to proceed whenever the Council sees fit." The Chancellor led them through a series of corridors toward the main negotiation chamber. Along the way, Catherine noticed representatives from at least a dozen different species watching them pass. Some looked at the humans with curiosity. Others showed what might have been pity. A few displayed open contempt. Humanity was still considered a young species by galactic standards. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 3 centuries ago. Most of the civilizations represented at Nexus Point were thousands of years old. Some were tens of thousands of years old. To them, humans were children, newcomers who had barely learned to walk among the stars, and children in this galaxy were expected to know their place. The negotiation chamber was a vast circular room with a domed ceiling that displayed a live image of the stars outside. A great table made of some kind of crystal occupied the center of the space, with seating arranged for all the participating delegations. Observers from neutral species filled the galleries above. Catherine saw the Dominion delegation immediately. They occupied the far side of the table, their dark chitin gleaming under the lights. High Arbiter Xyloth sat at their center, an 8-foot-tall insectoid creature with compound eyes that reflected everything around him in fractured images. His mandibles clicked constantly, producing sounds that his translator device converted into words. The humans arrive at last, Xyloth announced as Catherine and her team took their seats. We were beginning to wonder if your species had developed second thoughts about attending. We were merely ensuring that our affairs were in order, Catherine replied smoothly. One should always be prepared when entering important negotiations. Xyloth's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Indeed, though I suspect this negotiation will be simpler than you anticipate. The Dominion comes with clear terms. Accept them, and the war ends today. Catherine folded her hands on the table. We look forward to hearing those terms. High Arbiter. Humanity desires peace above all things. Do you? Xyloth leaned forward slightly. Your species has proven remarkably persistent in combat. Many in the Dominion believed humans would never agree to talk. They thought you would fight until the last of your kind was exterminated. We fight when we must, Catherine said calmly. We talk when we can. That is the human way. Chancellor Morix called the chamber to order, and the formal proceedings began. Representatives from the observing species made brief statements about the importance of peace and stability. Xyloth sat through these speeches with obvious impatience, his multiple limbs twitching. Finally, the moment came. Morix gestured to the Dominion delegation. High Arbiter Xyloth, you may present your terms. Xyloth rose to his full height, towering over everyone else in the room. His compound eyes fixed on Catherine with an intensity that made her skin crawl. The Dominion of Keth is prepared to be generous, he declared. We understand that humanity has suffered greatly in this conflict. We do not wish to destroy your species entirely. Therefore, we offer you survival. He pressed a control on the table, and a holographic display flickered to life above them. Catherine looked at the glowing text and her heart sank. These were not terms for peace. These were terms for surrender. Complete and total surrender. The war, she realized, was far from over. The holographic display hung in the air above the crystal table, its blue light casting strange shadows across the faces of every being in the chamber. Catherine Moore read each line carefully, her expression revealing nothing of the storm building inside her chest. Beside her, Admiral Victor Grant had gone very still, the way he always did when he was fighting to control his anger. The terms were worse than anyone had predicted. First, humanity would surrender 47 colony worlds along the border regions. These were not empty planets. These were homes to over 60 million human beings. Families had been born and raised on these worlds. Cities had been built. Farms had been planted. Children had grown up knowing no other sky. Second, the human military would be reduced to a fraction of its current size. All warships larger than patrol craft would be dismantled. All weapons capable of striking at faster than light speeds would be destroyed. Humanity would be left with barely enough force to defend against pirates, let alone a hostile power. Third, human expansion would be permanently limited. The species would be confined to a small region of space, representing less than 2% of the explored galaxy. While other civilizations continued to grow and spread among the stars, humanity would remain trapped in a tiny cage forever. And finally, the humans would pay reparations to the Dominion for the next 500 years. The payments would drain their economy, leaving them poor and dependent. Their children and their children's children would inherit this debt. Born into servitude before they took their first breath, High Arbiter Xyloth finished presenting the terms and settled. Back into his seat with obvious satisfaction, his mandibles clicked slowly, producing a sound that Catherine had learned to recognize as the Kathrani equivalent of a smile. "These terms are fair," Xyloth declared. "The Dominion has suffered greatly because of human aggression. We have lost soldiers, ships, and resources. We are owed compensation. However, we are also merciful. We could Dema. ND the complete destruction of your species. Instead, we offer you survival. You should be grateful." Catherine felt Daniel shift uncomfortably beside her. The young officer was clenching his fists under the table, struggling to contain his reaction. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, warning him to stay calm. "High Arbiter," she said, keeping her voice steady. "These terms raise several concerns that we must address." "Concerns?" Xyloth's compound eyes reflected her image 1,000 times. "What concerns could you possibly have?" "We are offering you peace. The 47 worlds you have listed include many heavily populated colonies. Prosperity Station alone is home to 3 million people. What will happen to these citizens if we surrender the territory?" Xyloth waved one of his limbs dismissively. "They will be relocated to appropriate facilities within Dominion space. The transition will be orderly." "Facilities," Victor spoke up, his deep voice cutting through the chamber. "You mean detention camps?" Several of the observing delegations shifted in their seats. Chancellor Morex raised one of his hands in a calming gesture, but Xyloth responded before the mediator could speak. "They are temporary housing centers," the High Arbiter corrected. "Your people will be cared for until they can be properly integrated into Dominion society. You should be thankful that we are willing to take responsibility for them at all." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. She knew exactly what integration meant to the Dominion. The 4 species that made up their coalition had all been conquered peoples once. They had been broken, reshaped, and forced to serve the Kathrani. Their cultures had been erased. Their histories had been rewritten. They had become tools, nothing more. That was the future being offered to humanity. She looked around the chamber at the other delegations. The Valones observed with their usual careful neutrality. The Tarathi, a race of tall, gray-skinned beings, watched with what might have been sympathy, but made no move to object. The Minduri small creatures, who communicated through bioluminescent pulses, flickered amongst themselves in rapid conversation. None of them spoke against the terms. None of them questioned the Dominion's demands. This was how the galaxy worked, Catherine realized. This was how it had always worked. The strong took what they wanted, and the weak accepted what they were given. Young species like humanity were expected to submit to older, more powerful civilizations. It was considered the natural order of things. The thought made her sick. "High Arbiter," she said carefully. "Humanity came to these negotiations hoping to find a path toward genuine peace. These terms do not represent peace. They represent conquest without the cost of continued fighting." Xyloth's mandibles clicked sharply. "You are in no position to reject our generosity, Ambassador. Your fleet is damaged. Your resources are running low. Your people grow tired of war. We offer you an end to the suffering. All you must do is accept reality. And what reality is that? The reality that humanity has lost." Xyloth rose from his seat again, his full height casting a shadow across the human delegation. "The reality that your species reached beyond its proper place in the galaxy and paid the price for its arrogance. The reality that you have 2 choices before you. Accept these terms and survive, or reject them and be destroyed." The chamber fell silent. Every eye was on Catherine, waiting for her response. She thought about her father, killed defending a colony that no longer existed. She thought about her brother, lost somewhere in the darkness between stars. She thought about her daughter, just 12 years old, waiting back on Earth for news of whether she would grow up free or in chains. "We need time to consider," Catherine said finally. "These terms require discussion among our delegation." Xyloth made a sound of impatience. "Very well. You have 1 standard day. But understand this, Ambassador. These terms will not improve. This is the Dominion's only offer. Take it or leave it. Chancellor Morix called for a recess, and the various delegations began to disperse. Catherine led her team toward the corridor that would take them to their assigned quarters as they walked. Daniel leaned close to her. They cannot be serious. They are asking us to surrender everything we have built. Everything we are. They are completely serious, Catherine replied quietly. And they expect us to agree because that is what every other species in this galaxy has done when faced with a stronger power. Victor fell into step beside her. Then what do we do? Catherine did not answer immediately. She walked in silence for several moments, her mind racing through possibilities. Finally, she stopped and turned to face her team. We do something they have never seen before, she said. We show them what humanity is really made of. In that moment, standing in the cold corridors of an alien space station, the fate of the human race began to change direction. The human delegation gathered in their private quarters aboard Nexus Point. The room was small by galactic standards, designed for species of human size, with plain walls and simple furniture. A security field around the door ensured that no one could listen to their conversation. Catherine stood by the single window, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the darkness, Earth waited for news. Billions of people were holding their breath, hoping that their ambassador would bring home peace. They had no idea what kind of peace was being offered. Victor sat at the small table in the center of the room, Dominion's terms displayed on his tablet. His face was grim as he read through them again. I've reviewed the details 3 times now. There is no hidden mercy in these conditions. They want complete submission. They want us to become like the other Dominion species, Daniel added. He was pacing back and forth across the room, too agitated to sit still. Servants. Slaves, really. Our culture erased, our history forgotten. Our children raised to believe that serving the Kethrani is the highest honor they can achieve. Catherine turned away from the window. Tell me about their military situation. What do our intelligence reports say? Daniel pulled up another file on his tablet. This is what makes no sense to me. According to our latest intelligence, the Dominion fleet took massive losses in the Kepler offensive 6 months ago. They lost nearly 40% of their capital ships. Their production facilities are struggling to replace them. By all our estimates, they are operating at perhaps 60% of their full strength. And yet they negotiate from a position of total dominance, Victor observed. They act as if they have already won the war completely. Catherine nodded slowly. Because they expect us to believe that they have won. They are gambling that we are too tired, too desperate, too afraid to question their demands. But we know the truth, Daniel said. We know they are weaker than they appear. Why would they take such a risk? Because it has always worked before. Catherine moved to the table and sat down across from Victor. I have studied the history of this galaxy carefully. Every time a young species has faced a larger power, they have backed down. They have accepted whatever terms were offered. They have submitted because they believed they had no other choice. Victor leaned back in his chair. The Dominion is betting that humans will do the same thing. Yes, and if we sign this treaty, they win everything without having to fire another shot. Their fleet can recover. Their economy can rebuild. And humanity becomes just another conquered species. Locked away in a small corner of space where we can never threaten them again. The room fell silent as the weight of the situation settled over them. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at Catherine. So what do we do? If we reject the terms, they might attack with everything they have left. Even at 60% strength, they could still cause tremendous damage. They could, Catherine agreed. But think about what that would cost them. More ships destroyed, more soldiers killed, more resources spent, and all while their other enemies watch and wait for signs of weakness. Victor's eyes narrowed. You think they cannot afford another major campaign? I think they are terrified of one. Why else would they be here, offering us survival instead of simply finishing the job? If they truly had the power to destroy us, they would have done it already. They would not waste time with negotiations. The Admiral considered this for a long moment. It is a significant gamble. If you are wrong, our people will suffer enormously. Our people are already suffering, Catherine replied. and they will continue to suffer under these terms. This treaty does not offer peace. It offers a slow death instead of a quick one. Our colonies stripped away, our military dismantled, our economy drained, our children born into debt and servitude. Is that the future we want to accept? Daniel sat down heavily in the remaining chair. When you put it that way, rejection seems less risky. There is something else to consider, Catherine continued. Right now, every species in this galaxy sees humanity as weak. They see us as just another young civilization about to be crushed by an older power. If we sign this treaty, that is all we will ever be. A cautionary tale about knowing your place. And if we walk away? Victor asked. Catherine smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we show them something they have never seen. A species that refuses to submit. A people who would rather face destruction than accept slavery. Win or lose, we change the story of humanity forever. Victor was quiet for a long time. He had been a soldier for 35 years. He had fought in dozens of battles. He had lost friends, comrades, people he loved. He knew better than anyone what war cost, but he also knew what honor meant and what freedom was worth. I have followed you for 15 years, Catherine, he said finally. Through negotiations and crises and moments when everything seemed lost, you have never led us wrong. I will follow you now. Daniel nodded eagerly. I am with you too. Whatever happens, I would rather face it standing than on my knees. Catherine looked at her team with deep gratitude. These were good people. Brave people. Whatever happened next, she was proud to stand beside them. Then we are agreed, she said. When the negotiations resume tomorrow, we will do something this galaxy has never witnessed. We will look the Dominion in the eye, and we will walk away. She turned back to the window, gazing out at the endless stars. Tomorrow, we show them what humanity is made of. The night passed slowly aboard Nexus Point. Catherine tried to sleep, but found herself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that could go wrong. By morning, she was exhausted but strangely calm. The decision was made. All that remained was to carry it out. Victor and Daniel met her in the corridor outside their quarters. Both looked tired but determined. They said nothing as they walked toward the negotiation chamber. There was nothing left to say. The other delegations were already assembled when they arrived. Chancellor Morix acknowledged their entrance with a polite gesture. High Arbiter Xyloth watched them approach with his compound eyes, mandibles clicking slowly. I trust the humans have come to their senses, he said as they took their seats. Are you prepared to sign the treaty? Catherine looked at him across the crystal table. She thought about her father, her brother, her daughter. She thought about every human who had ever lived and died and dreamed of the stars. No, she said clearly. We are not. The chamber went silent. Xyloth's mandibles stopped clicking. Chancellor Morix's serpentine form went rigid with surprise. The observers in the galleries leaned forward, certain they had misheard. And Catherine Moore rose to her feet, ready to change history. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. No, such a small word. Such a simple word. But in that moment, in that place, it carried the weight of worlds. High Arbiter Xyloth recovered first. His mandibles began clicking rapidly, a sound that Catherine had come to recognize as extreme agitation. His compound eyes seemed to darken as he rose from his seat. Perhaps I did not hear you correctly, Ambassador. Did you say no? Catherine stood her ground. Behind her, Victor and Daniel rose to their feet as well, forming a unified front. You heard me correctly, High Arbiter? Humanity rejects your terms. All of them. The chamber erupted into noise. The observing delegations began talking amongst themselves in a dozen different languages. Chancellor Morix raised several of his arms trying to restore order. Xyloth's fellow Dominion representatives shifted in their seats, clearly confused by this unexpected development. This is absurd, Xyloth declared, his voice booming through the translation system. You cannot reject our terms. You have no alternative. Your fleet is broken. Your resources are depleted. You are surrounded by hostile space. You have nothing. Catherine shook her head slowly. That is where you are wrong. We have something you will never understand. We have our dignity. We have our freedom. And we have the will to fight for both until our last breath. You are signing your species' death warrant, Xyloth snarled. The Dominion will crush you. Every colony burned. Every ship destroyed. Every human scattered to the void. Perhaps. Catherine's voice remained calm despite the threats. But that is our choice to make, not yours. Chancellor Morix finally managed to quiet the chamber. The serpentine mediator slithered closer to the table, his scales rippling with concern. Ambassador Moore, I urge you to reconsider. The Council has worked for years to arrange these negotiations. Peace is within your grasp. Why would you throw it away? Catherine turned to address not just Morix, but the entire assembly. Her voice carried clearly to every corner of the vast room. Chancellor, honored delegates, I have a question for all of you. What kind of peace is being offered here today? Is it a peace between equals, where both sides make sacrifices and both sides gain security? Or is it something else entirely? She gestured to the holographic display that still showed the Dominion's terms. Look at these conditions. Really look at them. We are asked to surrender our worlds. We are asked to dismantle our fleet. We are asked to limit our growth forever. We are asked to pay tribute for 500 years. Is this peace? Or is this surrender wearing a mask? The chamber was silent. Many of the observers avoided meeting her eyes. I've studied the history of this galaxy, Catherine continued. I know how these situations usually end. A younger species faces a larger power. They accept whatever terms are offered. They bow their heads and hope for mercy. And slowly, over centuries, they fade away. Their culture is absorbed. Their identity is lost. They become footnotes in someone else's story. She looked directly at Xyloth. That is what you expect from us. That is what you demand. But humanity will not follow that path. We are not here to become a footnote. We are not here to surrender our future so that you can add another conquered species to your collection. Xyloth's limbs were trembling with barely contained rage. You dare to lecture us? Your species is barely 3 centuries old. The Dominion has ruled these stars for 12,000 years. You are nothing compared to us. And yet here we are, Catherine replied. Still standing? Still fighting? Still refusing to bow? For 47 years, you have thrown everything you have at humanity. And we are still here. Ask yourself why that is, High Arbiter. Ask yourself why a species so young and so weak has survived against your ancient power. Victor stepped forward to stand beside Catherine. It is because we do not know how to give up. It is not in our nature. When we face a challenge, we fight harder. When we face defeat, we come back stronger. You can kill humans. You can destroy our ships and burn our worlds. But you cannot break our spirit. Daniel joined them, completing the line. We would rather die free than live as slaves. That is the truth at the core of our species. And it is something your Dominion has never faced before. High Arbiter Xyloth slammed one of his limbs against the crystal table, producing a sound that echoed through the chamber. Enough of your speeches. These are the only terms you will receive. Accept them, or face annihilation. Catherine looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her formal jacket and withdrew a small data chip. She placed it on the table and pushed it toward the center. This is our formal rejection of the Dominion's proposal. It is written in accordance with galactic diplomatic protocols, witnessed by this council, and effective immediately. She turned to her team. We are leaving. The human delegation began walking toward the exit. Behind them, the chamber descended into chaos. Observers shouted questions. Morix called for order. The Dominion representatives rose from their seats, uncertain whether to follow or remain. Xyloth's voice cut through the noise. You are making the greatest mistake in your species' history, Ambassador. The Dominion will not offer these terms again. When we come for you, it will be without mercy. Catherine paused at the door. She turned back to face the High Arbiter one final time. Then come, she said quietly. Bring your fleets and your armies. Bring your ancient power and your certainty of victory. And when you find humans waiting for you at every star, fighting for every world, dying for every inch of space we call home. Remember this moment. Remember that we offered you a different path. We offered you the chance to face us as warriors instead of as conquerors. You chose war. So be it. She pushed open the door. But know this. Whatever happens next, humanity will not kneel. Not today. Not ever. The doors closed behind the human delegation with a heavy sound that seemed to echo through the entire station in the negotiation chamber. Silence fell. High Arbiter Xyloth stood motionless, his compound eyes fixed on the spot where Catherine Moore had stood. The observers whispered among themselves, hardly able to believe what they had witnessed. Chancellor Morex broke the silence. In all my years of service, in all the negotiations I have mediated, I have never seen anything like this. A species in their position, walking away. It is without precedent. Xyloth's mandibles clicked slowly. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before. They have made their choice. Now they will live with the consequences. But as he watched the closed doors, something unfamiliar stirred in the High Arbiter's ancient mind. Something that might have been in a creature capable of such emotions. The first cold touch of doubt. The humans had walked away. And for the first time in 12,000 years, the Dominion did not know what would happen next. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours of the human delegation's departure from Nexus Point, every communication network was burning with the same incredible story. The humans had rejected the Dominion's terms. They had walked away from peace. They had chosen possible destruction over certain submission. On 1,000 worlds. Beings of every shape and size gathered around their information screens, struggling to understand what they had heard. It simply did not make sense. No species behaved this way. The strong dominated and the weak submitted. That was the fundamental law of galactic civilization. It had always been so. And yet the humans had said no, Ambassador. Catherine Moore returned to Earth 3 days after leaving Nexus Point. She expected to face anger, fear, perhaps even demands for her removal from office. Instead, she found something else entirely. Crowds gathered at the spaceport where her shuttle landed. Millions more watched through broadcast systems across the planet. And when she stepped onto the ground of her homeworld, they cheered. They cheered for her refusal to surrender. They cheered for her defense of human dignity. They cheered because she had done what so many of them had wanted to do but never had the chance. She had looked at the galaxy's greatest power and told them that humanity would not bow. President. Margaret Collins met her at the spaceport. The president was a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, a leader who had guided humanity through some of the darkest years of the war. She embraced Catherine without hesitation. You did what needed to be done, the president said quietly. Whatever comes next, you gave us back our pride. In the days that followed, the galaxy waited for the Dominion's response. Military analysts predicted an immediate offensive. The Kathrani had been humiliated in front of every major civilization. They would need to restore their reputation through overwhelming force. Human colonies near the border began evacuation procedures. The fleet was placed on highest alert. But the attack never came. Intelligence. Reports began filtering in from sources across Dominion space. High Arbiter Xyloth had returned to the Kathrani homeworld. Emergency sessions of the Dominion Council were being held behind closed doors. Their fleet was not mobilizing for an offensive. Instead, it was pulling back to defensive positions around their core worlds. Admiral Victor. Grant studied the reports with growing amazement. They are not coming. They are actually not coming. Catherine sat across from him in the military command center on Earth. She had barely slept since returning, but her mind was clear. They cannot come. Not without risking everything they have left. The Kepler offensive cost them too much. Their bluff failed, and now they have no choice but to back down. But their reputation, Victor said. In this galaxy, reputation is everything. How can they simply accept what happened at Nexus Point? They cannot. Catherine leaned back in her chair, thinking carefully, which means they will need to find another way to respond. Something that saves face without requiring them to fight a war they cannot win. Over the following weeks, her prediction proved accurate. The Dominion issued formal statements claiming that the humans had violated diplomatic protocols. They accused Ambassador Moore of acting in bad faith. They declared that the Dominion remained the supreme power in the region and that humanity would eventually be forced to accept their rightful place. But they did not attack. And as time passed, the galaxy noticed. 3 months after the negotiations collapsed, a small vessel from the Tyranny Collective arrived at Earth. The Tyranny were a minor species who had lived under Dominion influence for centuries. They had been forced to pay tribute, host Cathroni military bases, and follow Dominion directives in all matters of importance. They had submitted, just as every species was expected to submit. Now they were asking for a different arrangement. Their ambassador was a tall, gray-skinned being named Voreth. He met with Catherine in a small conference room, away from the formal halls of government. His dark eyes studied her with intense curiosity. "We have watched you," Voreth said. "My people and many others. We watched what you did at Nexus Point. We have been watching what has happened since." Catherine nodded. "And what have you seen?" "We have seen the Dominion hesitate. For the first time in living memory, we have seen them uncertain. They do not know how to respond to a species that refuses to follow the rules." Vorath leaned forward. "This has given hope to many who had abandoned hope long ago." "Hope for what?" "For change." Vorath's voice dropped lower, as if he was afraid of being overheard even in this secure room. "The Tyranny are not the only ones watching. The Mindari, the Lesser Keth, who serve as soldiers for the Dominion but dream of freedom, a dozen other species who have lived under the Kethrani heel for centuries, all of them are asking the same question now." "What question?" "If the humans can stand, why cannot we?" Catherine felt her heart beat faster. This was something she had hoped for, but had not dared to expect. "What are you proposing?" "Nothing formal. Not yet. But my government has authorized me to explore possibilities. Trade arrangements. Information sharing. Perhaps eventually, something more substantial." Voreth paused. "We are not warriors like you. We cannot fight the Dominion directly. But there are other ways to resist, and having friends makes resistance easier." It was the beginning of something new. Over the next year, 3 more species quietly reached out to humanity. Then 5 more. Then 12. They came with trade proposals and intelligence offerings and tentative suggestions of cooperation. None of them were powerful enough to challenge the Dominion alone. But together, carefully, slowly, they began to form something that had never existed before in that region of space, a network of the unwilling, an alliance of those who refused to accept the old order. The Dominion noticed, of course. Xyloth issued threats and warnings. Cathrani diplomats visited the species who were drifting toward humanity and reminded them of their obligations. Some backed away in fear, but others did not. Something had changed in the galaxy, and it could not be unchanged. 1 year after the events at Nexus Point, Catherine Moore stood on the bridge of the carrier. Resolute as it orbited Earth, a BROADCAST was being transmitted across every human world and to every species that had aligned with humanity. 1 year ago, she said, we made a choice. We were told that we were weak. We were told that we had no options. We were told that submission was our only path forward, and we refused. She looked directly into the recording device, speaking to billions of beings across the stars. Today, we are not weaker. We are stronger. We have new friends. We have new possibilities. We have proven that the old rules of this galaxy are not laws of nature. They are simply habits, and habits can be broken. She thought of her father, who had died defending human freedom. She thought of her brother, who had vanished in the darkness. She thought of her daughter, who would grow up in a galaxy where humanity stood proud. To those who still believe that the strong must always crush the weak, we offer this lesson. Strength is not only measured in ships and weapons, it is measured in will. It is measured in courage. It is measured in the simple refusal to accept injustice. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Humanity refused. And we are still here. Remember that? Because this is only the beginning. In the great archives of the Galactic Council, historians would later identify this moment as the start of a new era. Not the human ascendancy, as some would call it, but the Great Awakening. The moment when the galaxy began to change. The moment when the old order started to crack, and it had all begun with one word, spoken by one woman in one chamber, against all expectations and against all odds. No, sometimes. That is all it takes to change the universe.